Welcome back to Arise News Hour. I'm Charles Aniagolu. To Sudan now, a country that has plunged into increasing uncertainty and brutal violence. The African Union says it's suspending Sudan with immediate effect until a civilian-led transitional authority is in place. The AU's Peace and Security Department is threatening to take further action and said this was the only way out of the crisis. On Monday, security forces attacked a sit-in outside the army headquarters in the capital Khartoum. The assault was the worst violence in Sudan since April the 11th, when Omar al-Bashir was overthrown. He'd been in power for 3 decades. The ensuing talks between the Transitional Military Council and the opposition were not making enough progress, which is why the demonstrators continued to protest. Consistent and numerous reports say the paramilitary unit, the feared rapid security forces known as the Janjaweed, which gained notoriety for brutal atrocities in the Darfur conflict in Western Sudan back in 2003, is now roaming the streets and initiating random violence. Dozens of people have been killed, though the numbers are disputed. Well, for more on this story, let's cross over to London, from where the African Affairs analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, John Ofe-Ansah, has been monitoring developments in Sudan. Good to talk with you, John. The situation in Sudan clearly very tense. Will this move by the African Union actually change anything?
I doubt if it will make any mad improvement or any mad difference to the situation now. I mean, the clamp down by the rapid special support forces. I mean, if it was meant, or it is meant, to cow, the uprising or the opposition into submission, it has rather, achieved, it has not achieved the desired effect. It's achieved the opposite effect, because it has hardened the people's resolve to press on with their demands for a complete break from civilian to a full military, a complete break from military to a full civilian democracy.
Well, at least the African Union is taking some action, because, I mean, on the global level, at the United Nations, I mean, on the world level, Russia and China are opposing any action against Sudan, and we haven't heard of any tough action from the US or any country in the West.
I believe, well, the US have made some noises that, and I think they've condemned the violence, the killings of the protesters. But I believe the U.S. actions will be indirect, through their allies, in the Middle East, namely Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt. So if they will take action, I believe that they will take an indirect action through these 3 allies in the Middle East. But with Russia and China's stance, I believe it is just the usual, counterbalance that they always try to offer, against any moves being made by the West.
Well, you're certainly right there about countries like Egypt. I mean, I suppose the logical question is the Transitional Military Council likely to pay any attention at all to this move by the African Union? Because, I mean, in Africa, as you said, they've got the support of Egypt, which is the current head of the African Union.
No, the AU's action actually is number one. In fact, I published this morning, before the AU made the announcement, that Eritrea, has rather branded the AU weak, for not taking any concrete action, up until now. Okay, but I think what AU is doing, in my opinion, is just merely symbolic. Okay, and we shouldn't forget that the military, especially the Janjaweed, the rapid support forces have a history of genocide in Darfur, which has so far, been kept quiet. So they are trying to. I think they are apprehensive. They are fears that if there's a transition to a full civilian democracy, right, heads will roll. Arrest warrants may be issued, and people will be arrested and tried for those for the genocide that took place in Darfur a few years ago.
Meanwhile, of course, away from the diplomacy, John, the other thing that's happened today is that the authorities in Sudan have admitted that 50 people were killed when pro-democracy protesters were attacked earlier this week. But there's pretty widespread belief, isn't there, that the number is actually much more than that?
Yeah, I believe the number is much more. I mean, officially, they will just try and keep the figures down. I mean, just to save face. But according to sources, the sources I have there, more than 100, about 108 people so far have been killed.
Right, so we've got the AU taking action. We've got the rest of the world sitting on the sidelines. We've got the protesters digging in, and we've got the Transitional Military Council split. We're hearing on one side that the head of the Transitional Council is saying that he wants talks. The deputy head says he doesn't want talks. And another branch of that Transitional Military Council that you talked about, the Janjaweed, the paramilitary forces, roaming the streets. What happens next?
In fact, personally, I fear, an escalation, in the violence. Not only the military or the Janjaweed against the civilian, but maybe, there could be a split in the so-called Transitional Military Council, because the deputy, leader of the Jansa, is the head of the transitional support. The TSF, the Janjaweed. Okay, so it is he whose forces, have been going around the streets, killing people and all that. So he is trying to protect himself. Whereas the leader of the Jansa, General Bahan, right, is rather sympathetic to, and the large majority of the regular army, are sympathetic to the cause of the civilian population, of the protesters. So my fear is that if a compromise cannot be reached within the military, the Transitional Military Council itself, what I foresee happening will be, a complete upheaval, a complete chaos, right? Maybe a fight between the two camps within the military council, the Jansa.
Well, that sounds tremendously worrying. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. John, as always, thank you very much indeed. John Ofe-Ansah is the African Affairs Analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, and he was talking to me there from our studios in London.